Wait, what did you say? Dave was in his wife's office. She was the head honcho of the division, the big chief. Dave, on the other hand, was a lowly account representative, quite a bit down the food chain. He was a little nervous at first when she came on board, but there were several levels of management between them, so he thought it would be fine. Maybe not. Your numbers are way down, Mr. Waxman. You were the worst performer of the year in your division. I'm afraid we had no choice. Xavier is waiting outside to escort you to your office to collect your things. Xavier, or X as he was called, was one of their 2 security guards. They had always referred to each other as Miss and Ms. in work settings to keep things more professional. She kept her last name for professional reasons, she said, but everyone in the office knew they were married. He even had a picture of her on his desk, showing her shaking the hand of the chairman of the board as she received her promotion. That's it? 9 years of loyal service to this company, and I'm terminated because my numbers are off? If you had bothered to listen to me, you would know. Please stop. The decision has been made. Let's not make it any harder than it has to be. For some reason, that struck him as funny. Listen, Miss Patterson, She must have hit some button because, suddenly, 300 pounds of black muscle was in the room with him. Xavier, would you please escort Mr. Waxman to his desk to collect his things? Best of luck to you, Mr. Waxman. Perhaps this will encourage you to try harder at your next position. Xavier definitely looked embarrassed, but he had his own job to do. Dave looked at him and grinned. Come on, X, like the lady said, let's not make it any harder than it has to be. She was still talking when Dave went out the door. Everyone avoided looking at him, which told him most of them knew beforehand. That definitely didn't improve his mood. He walked slowly, looking at those who glanced at him in the eye. They looked away every time, and the women actually blushed. He kept very little in the way of personal items in his office, so it didn't take 15 minutes to pack one small box. He was walking out when X spoke. You forgot this, Mr. Waxman, he said, handing Dave the expensive pen and pencil set she had given him when he made Salesman of the Year for the first time. Dave looked at it for a second and dropped it in the wastebasket with her picture. No, I didn't. X drove Dave home so he could take the company car back. After several attempts at conversation, he got the message and fell silent. As Dave got out, X reached over to shake his hand. Dave took it because it was just his job, and he really liked the guy. Sorry, man. Sorry it happened like that. Dave grinned, even though he didn't feel like it. Me too. He walked in, looking at the house as if it were the very first time he had ever seen it. He realized suddenly there was very little of his presence in the house. It seemed she was minimizing him at home as well as at work. It made him wonder if he had a performance issue at home and if he was being punished for not keeping his numbers up. She came in about 7. Even for her, it was late. Dave was watching a baseball game and didn't even look up. Hi, honey. Sorry I'm late. Meetings ran over. You know how the board loves the sound of their own voices. He didn't respond, just kept watching the game. She looked at him for a minute before deciding to try a different approach. What's for dinner? It had been their practice over the years that whoever got home first made dinner. It occurred to him, as he examined their relationship, that she probably hadn't made dinner more than a dozen times in the last year, and most of those times were because he was traveling. Whatever you decide to fix yourself. I've already eaten. She just stared for a minute before opening her mouth and starting the worst fight of their marriage. Surely you're not mad about today. It was a business decision, honey. It had nothing to do with you personally. I still love you just as much. For an executive and a fairly intelligent person, I can't help but think in this case you're a... And by the way, yes, I am angry. In fact, I'm pissed beyond words. You handled the whole thing very badly. Had I ever gotten an unfavorable review in all the time I'd worked there? Where's the paper trail of warnings, counseling, and reprimands? Sure, my numbers were down, but there's a very good reason, one you never bothered to discover. Stop begging. I'm sure I did the right thing professionally. It shocked him so badly that he did stop talking for a minute. She smiled and started to speak, but he exploded. Screw you, the board, and every other asshole in the company. You were not professional, you were not reasonable, and you damn sure weren't interested in anything I had to say. Tell me, how much input did Adler have in this? She was reeling from his outburst. She actually stuttered for a minute before she got it out. He's been concerned for months and was very nervous when he brought me the numbers. You had gone from being one of our top producers to the absolute worst. I had no choice. I had to send the message that no matter who you were, if you didn't produce, you were gone. It was the only way I could maintain the respect of the people under me. Once again, a stupid, I've been thinking all afternoon now that I had some free time. When did you stop respecting me as a man and an employee? If you had the least bit of love for me personally or regard professionally, you would have handled this completely differently. You could have tried talking to me, given me a heads up, and if it got bad, you could have offered me a chance to resign. Do you have any idea how hard it's going to be for me to find another position? If I can't perform well enough for my wife, someone who is supposed to love me, why would strangers trust me to do a good job? You screwed me. In this town, I'll have a hell of a time landing a job now. And not like I can whip out a glowing review from my old company now, can I? I've said enough. If we continue, or rather, if I continue, I may say some things that can't be taken back. Why don't you get some dinner, and I'll finish watching the game? She tried one more time. I never thought you'd take it so badly. It's just business, honey. We'll be fine. And don't worry about a job. I make more than enough to keep us. Dave held up his hand. Please stop while you're losing. I bet you'd love to turn me into a house husband. It would subvert your reputation as a tough-as-nails CEO. I can hear them now, watch out for that one. She's so tough she fired her husband and turned him into a little house husband. Bet she's the one who's on top when they screw. If she isn't banging him with a strap-on, I wonder if she makes him wear panties around the house. Well, you can forget that. I'll eventually land another position somewhere, even if it's not here. Now, please stop talking. He had finally managed to piss her off. Fine. Sulk, get angry. It might give you enough motivation to do a good job next time. FYI, honey, your little tantrum put the skids on the extra good loving I had intended to give you tonight. Looks like it'll be you and your fingers if you want any release in the near future. He shrugged. Fine. At least they won't fire me if I don't perform as expected. That one hit her hard. She tried to form words until she finally screamed in frustration and stomped out of the room. He heard her rattling pans in the kitchen, so he assumed she made her own dinner. A little while later, he heard her go up the stairs. She came back in the absolutely no sex for you tonight outfit, an old t-shirt and ratty sweatpants. It seemed to upset her that he didn't comment. They sat in silence, and he let it stretch. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry, okay? I wrestled with it a long time before I made the decision. I do love you, and it isn't the end of the world. We can stop talking about it. What's done is done, and you can't unring the bell. I'm going to bed. I need to get up early and put some feelers out to see if I can salvage anything out of the fiasco you've turned my life into. Good night. She floundered for something to say before settling on, I'll be up in a little while. He was already asleep when she woke him with her screams. It seems when she changed, she never noticed that his things were gone. He was in the largest guest room with an attached bath and planned to stay there a while. Soon, she was knocking on the door, demanding that he let her in. Dave just turned over, wondering how mad she'd be when she realized he'd changed the lock on the door and she didn't have a key. 10 minutes later, he heard the lock rattle. A few minutes after that, he heard a sigh and then went back to sleep. Jen brought her boss her standard coffee and pastry the next morning, as well as her own. She had been with her since her first promotion as secretary and later as private assistant. Jen loved her for how she treated her and was the one person in the company who could tell her the truth without worrying about repercussions. Jen pulled a chair next to the desk, and they went through their morning ritual of coffee and personal time. How'd it go when you got home? Jen asked. Her boss sighed. Not good. Not good at all. He used more swear words in 2 hours than I've heard from him in all the years we've been together. Apparently, when he's angry, the truth comes out, and he thinks very little of my management skills. He even moved out of the bedroom and changed the lock on the one he moved into. Have I told you he threw the pen set he kept on his desk in the trash, along with my picture? Really? Why is he taking it so hard? Jen looked at her boss with sad eyes. I warned you. You should have left him some dignity. The way you did it was really cold. Boss, I had to do it that way. I was sending a message to everyone, no one is bulletproof. If you're not performing to standard, you're out. How did the rank and file take it? Truthfully? Well, Bev, it's divided. Most of the men and some of the women think you're a screaming witch. A few admire you, but it's very few. A surprising number are updating their resumes, saying that a company that fires people with no warning whatsoever is not a company they want to work for. 2 more of your salesmen say they've seen the writing on the wall. One already has an interview lined up, and I suspect that in 2 weeks' time, he'll be gone. The other is thinking about relocating to be closer to his aging parents, and this is the incentive he says he needs. Beverly couldn't believe her ears. This wasn't what she had in mind at all. She thought that if she showed everyone, regardless of who it was, that she meant business when it came to the company, everyone would work harder. She had no intention of sparking an exodus. This could be very bad, very, very bad. She knew that in a couple of years, she would be in line for a board seat, maybe eventually chairman. This might slow those plans down considerably. Jen brought her back to reality. What are you going to do about your husband? She waved her hands dismissively, still thinking about her job. Give him a little time and space, I guess. He really does love me, he'll come around. Jen had an idea. It was going to take more than that, but she held her silence. She had been loyal to Beverly all these years, but if things got bad and people started leaving, she needed an exit plan. She had her own family to worry about. Dave spent the next 3 weeks being spectacularly unproductive. He stopped going to the gym, stopped eating right, and was drunk more than he was sober. He did nothing around the house, leaving a mess wherever he felt like. Bev tried being supportive at first, even through his cutting remarks, until she finally sank into silence. He did notice that she spent a lot more time at work. Evidently, she felt more comfortable there where she was queen. He then went through a phase of not bathing. After 3 days, Bev finally had enough. For God's sake, Dave, man up. You stink and you've got a pretty good start on a pot belly. You might like living like a pig, but I don't. I'm sorry. All right, I could have handled it better, but as you said, I can't unring the bell. Her face softened. Please, honey, I miss the old you. I miss you in our bed, and I miss you in me. It's been almost a month. Why won't you come back to me? Dave held up his fingers and wiggled them. I'm kind of involved now. They seem to love me and have never once complained about my performance or offered to terminate me. Besides, you're already in a committed relationship. She went white, then red. I have never cheated on you, not once in all the time we've been married. Although I have to admit, once the word got out that we weren't getting along, I've had offers. We'll get back to that in just a minute. And you've cheated on me our whole marriage, not with a man, but with a job. It will always have first call on your time. You will always put it first above any needs I may have. Do you know how many anniversaries we've missed celebrating together? 8 out of 13 years. Something was always more important at work than spending time with the man you supposedly loved above all others. Don't get me started on missed birthdays, the times you broke commitments with both our parents and good friends. Ever notice how rarely you see your parents now, or how many old friends we used to have that we haven't socialized with in years? You just never seem to be able to spare the time. I'm really glad now we never had children. They would think they were living in a single-parent home because they would never see you. As for your offers, how many have come from people higher in the organization? I can't imagine you screwing down. It would have to be someone who could help your career somehow. Dave felt bad for her for just a second, looking at the pained expression on her face. He quickly got over it when she slapped the hell out of him, the first time either had ever touched the other in anger. He looked in the mirror 30 minutes later, and the print was still on his cheek. "You son of a bitch. Don't you know I'm doing all this for us so we can retire while we're both still young enough to enjoy it? So I'm not Miss Congeniality, and I apologized every time I missed an anniversary or major event in our lives, and we agreed no children. I couldn't afford the distraction, so don't throw that up to me. As for the offers, yes, some are from people who could help my career, but I would never have an affair because I still love you and could never betray you like that. You need to get your act together. So get showered, dressed, shaved, and let the woman who loves you take you out for dinner." She stopped, out of breath from emotion and the long speech. He gave her a sad smile. "Sorry, I've already had dinner, 3 burritos and a large fry. And on the subject of children, I didn't want to be a biological dead end. I loved you so much at the time, though, that the voice was easy. It still hurt when my clients used to pull out pictures of their families. What was I going to show them? We don't even have a dog. You're right, though, the pity party has to stop. I'm going upstairs to shower, shave, and try to turn back into a real person. I'll hit the gym 3 times a day for a while. After all, what else do I have to do? Thanks for the motivational seminar." She just stood there in shock from his words and the fact that she had hit her husband. Bev was smart enough not to follow him, although when he got downstairs, she was very contrite and apologized. "I'm sorry, but you don't know how hard this is on me. One business decision shouldn't destroy a good marriage like this. Please, I'm sorry I had to fire you, but it was in the best interest of the company. Like I've told you many times before, it was just business. It doesn't mean I love you any less." He sighed. "Look, Bev, I know you think in your heart you did the right thing. Firing me was just the final straw. I've played second fiddle to your career our whole marriage, and frankly, I'm done. I hope the board chair can keep you warm at night and that the raises and accolades will make up for the loss of grandchildren. I hope your success fills the void of a sterile life without family or close friends." He paused. "Is it hard on you because you regret how you handled things and hurt me so badly, or is it hard because suddenly people are leaving you? You created a hostile work environment when you did this to me. People don't respect you anymore, they fear you, afraid you'll arbitrarily fire them at any time. That can't be conducive to a productive workforce. Don't look so shocked. I actually have friends there, and every time I see one, they fill me in. And before you ask, I say nothing to denigrate you. I only say you were sure of your actions at the time. I'm curious as to how you're going to handle it when the numbers drop and the chairman pops around for a visit. Better hire a really good spin doctor if you don't already have one." Dave sighed quietly. "Bev, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you now, this is going to get a lot worse. Be prepared for what's coming in the next few weeks. Now, if you will excuse me, I have some serious gym time to make up for." Beverly was lying in bed, feeling sorry for herself and going over the conversation when it hit her. He said, "I loved you so much at the time." She was still wondering if he still loved her when she finally drifted off into a fitful sleep. 3 days later, Beverly found herself sitting with Jen, pouring her heart out. "I just don't know what to do any longer. Everything I say or try, he turns around on me. I'm beginning to understand he's carried these resentments around for years but held them in. He hasn't touched me sexually in almost 8 weeks. I had to buy a vibrator to keep the edge off, or I'd be climbing the walls. I can't believe he turned down the job opportunity one wrangled for him. He didn't even wait for me to get home. He came here while you were running an errand for me and exploded. I'm very glad it was lunchtime and most everyone was out of the office or in the break room. Why did he get so angry when you were just trying to help him? Well, I had to promise the president over there I'd spread a little of our business his way if he helped me out. Things were going well until the final sit down, and the guy laid it out. He was only hiring Dave as a direct favor to me and only after I made some concessions. He told Dave he was giving him the absolutely worst territory and if he didn't bring the numbers up quickly, he wouldn't make it past the probation period. Just because your wife carried you all those years, he told him, doesn't mean I'll be understanding. What did Dave do? He stood up, politely thanked the man for the interview, then he turned and left, coming straight here. The president called me just after he left and raised hell with me because he just walked out. Then he demanded that I keep my commitment to him. They changed the subject, talking general business, when the receptionist called and said she had a gentleman there who wanted to see Bev, but he didn't have an appointment. He said he only needed 5 minutes and if she would be so kind. He said he had something to deliver. Curious, Bev had him escorted to her office. He was a large man with a friendly face, dressed impeccably in a nice suit and tie. He thanked her for her time and got down to business. "Miss Beverly Patterson, or should I address you as Mrs. David Waxman? I go by my maiden name here for professional reasons. What can I do for you today?" He looked apologetic when he handed her the papers. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you've been served. Good day. I'll find my own way out." Beverly looked at the large envelope and fainted. She came to her senses on her sofa. Jen and her ex had placed her there, and Jen was wiping her face with a cold cloth. "What happened?" "You fainted." "I fainted? Why would I faint?" Jen held up the envelope, and it all flooded back. Bev started crying uncontrollably. It took her 20 minutes to cry it out. In a trembling voice, she asked Jen to open it and tell her how bad it was. Jen opened the envelope and nearly fainted herself. She read through the documents with intense concentration before placing them gently on the table in front of the couch. "The good news, Beverly, is that he's not filing for divorce," Jen said. Bev started smiling again, but Jen held up her hand. "He's doing something a lot worse. He's suing the company, you, Bob Adler, and the chairman of the board for wrongful termination and mental cruelty. You need to get hold of him fast and talk him into withdrawing all this, or your career here is over. It doesn't matter whether he wins or loses, the bad publicity will be enormous. If you get to keep your job, you'll never rise any higher." Beverly nearly fainted again before pulling herself together and driving straight home, trying her best to set a land speed record for a luxury SUV. All she found was a note on the dining room table. "I'm sorry, Miss Patterson, but you crossed the line. My lawyer assures me it's pretty much a slam dunk, and your board will do just about anything to keep it quiet. She was pretty ticked when I told her I would accept no deals and intended to make this as public as possible. Don't bother looking for me. On her advice, I've moved out, at least temporarily. I still love you, though. I don't understand why, but when this is over, I'm willing to go into counseling if you are. Maybe we can find our way back to each other, maybe not, but I want to at least try. Oh, and if it makes any difference, I got a new job. Something new for me, and I look forward to it. We'll talk soon." Beverly leaned back in the kitchen chair, watching her life and career go up in flames. Just when she thought her life couldn't get any worse, it did. 2 weeks had gone by, and the hearing was in 4 days. The board had sent an independent HR expert and a lawyer in, and it didn't look good. The discussions they'd had with the employee did not paint her as the best of bosses. She was sitting in her chair, staring into space instead of working, when Bob Adler burst into the room. She had always liked Bob, had actively recruited him, and he had done a really good job up until then. He'd flirted hard after she had fired Dave, and Beverly had leaned on him to help with the pain. She was lonely and depressed, and when he offered to take her to dinner to forget her problems for a while, she accepted. They ended up drinking way too much wine, and when he kissed her, it felt so good she didn't stop him. Then reason kicked in, and she pushed him away. He apologized, and Beverly stopped any non-professional contact, even though he pleaded with her to give it a chance. "Damn it, Bev, you need to do something about this. Solomon Enterprises has just called and decided not to sign the contract. There goes 18% of our business. All they said was they'd found a cheaper, more reliable source whose quality matched or exceeded ours. They told me they would be glad to let us bid next year, but it had better be something spectacular if this new supplier works out. If that's not enough, Apex and Stewart Industries have both been hinting they may go to someone else. That's another 8%. That was absolutely the last thing Beverly wanted to hear. If they lost a quarter of their business, especially while they were tied up in the wrongful termination case, she was toast, as well as Adler and maybe a few others. She needed to move on this quickly. She sent Bob out, especially when he started pestering her for another date, saying it would be okay now that she was separated. Bev wasn't sure she had a marriage left, but a surefire way to finish it would be to go out with Bob and have Dave find out about it. She reached for the phone. "Hello, Mr. Solomon. Thank you for taking my call." "You're welcome, Beverly. How many times have I asked you to call me S? I'd like to thank you. After all this time, we were friends." "We are, S. Tell Susan hello from me. And I hear your daughter just got her MBA from Wharton. Is she going to be the future of Solomon Enterprises?" He laughed. "I hope so. The girl is already smarter than I ever was. I'm giving her 3 years, then Susan and I intend to sail away into the sunset." "That sounds lovely. I'm guessing you know why I'm calling." "Yes." "I'm sorry, Beverly. The new supplier is cheaper, faster, and exceeds our quality standards. The difference is significant enough that I can't walk away from it." "Have you signed the contracts yet?" "Not yet, but we're scheduled to finish up the paperwork in 2 weeks." "Good. Please, S, give me a chance to see if I can match or better their deal. One meeting, that's all I ask." He sighed. "All right. For old time's sake, I'll give you one shot. Set it up, and I'll be there." Beverly was sure she could win the business back when she talked to S, so she stopped worrying about that and focused on the upcoming hearing. Dave was at loose ends and about to go out of his mind. It looked as if he had no hope of finding anything in his line of work. He was going to have to expand the search area, and that meant moving. He was at the gym, straining his guts out, wondering if he had a marriage left at all. Yes, he had coasted the last year, but Beverly never once allowed him to share his thoughts. She didn't know he had deliberately let orders dwindle or that his core base of customers was fine with it. It was blind chance that after he left the gym, he ran into S. Solomon and his wife, Susan. S had been one of Dave's first customers. In fact, they went back 8 years. After they got past the customer-salesman relationship, Dave was treated like family. He once told Susan she was the smart aunt he wished he had when he was growing up. That statement cemented their relationship, and Dave had even introduced her to others as his favorite aunt. Susan would giggle and coo, and S would grin at her antics. "Susan, what a surprise. It's so good to see you. Are you in town on business?" "All pleasure. I'm happy to say we just got out of the theater. I've always wanted to see The Odd Couple, and this is supposed to be the best production of the revival around. When we found out they would be here, we just had to come." S just smiled. He once told Dave that his real job was to make his wife happy, and his business was just a means to that end. He never forgot a birthday or anniversary, and most of his employees benefited from it because he instituted a policy of giving his employees a half day off on their wedding anniversary and the whole day off afterwards to recover, as he put it. He also paid them for the time off. Turnover in his office and factories was the lowest in the state. Someone had to pass away or move away before there was an opening. Every woman got roses and chocolates on her birthday, and every man got something in line with his hobbies, be it a box of golf balls, a new fishing reel, or fine cigars. Executives came to his business to observe his operation, and while many changed nothing, a few copied him. They insisted that Dave join them, and for 90 minutes, he forgot his problems and admired what a true relationship was. Eventually, though, they brought up Dave's situation. Susan was baffled, and S was a little ticked. "You were one of her best. I really don't understand it." "Did she not understand your reasoning?" "She never gave me a chance to explain. S just called me into her office and fired me in the most public way possible. It's poison the well locally. It looks like I'll be moving soon." Susan spoke up. "Does Beverly know you're considering this? Is she willing to go with you?" "No, she doesn't know yet, and she would never leave her lover, Susan. Before you ask, I have to believe she's never cheated on me, at least physically. No, her lover is her job, and like a skilled seducer, it's offered her things I could never compete with." S was quiet for a minute, then grinned. "Since you're at loose ends, my boy, hop by and see me in the next couple of days. I may be able to help you out." With nothing else better to do, Dave was in his office 3 days later. They talked general business for a few minutes when S asked what on the surface was an innocent question. "Ever hear of the RGP Group?" Dave had indeed. A new company out of South Korea, they were trying to break into the US market. He had met the youngest son of the owner in an airport while they were both waiting on a delayed flight. They found out what each other did, and he happily showed Dave some of his products on his laptop. Dave looked them over and realized they would be in direct competition with his company. Luckily for the business, they were concentrating on the West Coast, far from his area of operation. The young man was likable, though. His father had sent him to the U.S. to knock on doors and get used to American ways. He had an entourage with him, but most were just as clueless as he was since they ended up in the same towns a lot. Dave kind of took him under his wing. Dave lost contact with him when they sent him to the Midwest, basing him in Chicago. Dave breathed a little sigh of relief. Their products were high quality, and their prices were almost 30% less than the company Beverly and Dave represented. Dave knew that S hadn't asked the question casually. "Yeah, I know of them. I'm even kind of friends with the youngest son of the owner, but I haven't talked to him in over a year." S looked a little embarrassed. "They're expanding into our area. I talked to a few people who've used their product, and they all seem to be satisfied. I haven't responded to them, mostly because of you. Your stuff is higher, but you always kept your word, always delivered on time, always followed up if we had a problem. We, Stewart, and a few others took your advice when you demonstrated the latest version, and we've been retooling for the better part of the year, using up old inventory. I don't know about the others, but I have about a month's supply before I'll be completely changed over. We find ourselves in a unique position. Our GP's version fits even better into our plans than your old company's version does. The main reason I wanted you to come by was to ask your advice and offer you a job. Instead of selling, why don't you try buying? My purchasing manager is retiring, and we still haven't found anyone we feel will fit. With your experience in sales, vendors would have a hard time trying to take advantage of you. After all, you know all the tricks, right? Besides, most either know you or know your reputation, so it'll cut down on a lot of haggling. What were you making before you got fired? And I don't mean now, I mean your best year." Stunned, Dave told him. "Not a problem there. In fact, I can probably offer 5 or 10 grand more, plus performance and savings bonuses. Why don't you give it a try? Even if it doesn't work out or you decide it's not for you, it'll look good on your resume when they see you've done work on both sides of the business." In the end, Dave decided to give it a try. It beat moving out of state, and he was a little excited about it for the first time since he got fired. He was excited about something. He went home to his apartment, actually happy to be there. His former house was really her house, a monument to her success. She'd often remind him in small ways that if their salaries had been equal, they could never have afforded it. Dave thought a little about the upcoming hearing. Inside, he wondered how much of what he was doing was seeking justice and how much was revenge. Probably half and half. He knew if he won, Beverly's career was over. Even if she got to keep her job, it was as far as she would ever go in the company. If he lost, it would still take years to recover from the damage. Would he be happy if he was vindicated? Probably. Would he be happy about hurting her career? In honesty, he thought he would be, just a bit, not because of who they were, but because she needed an object lesson in how to treat people and a reminder that the world didn't revolve around her. Thinking back to when they first got together, he remembered a fresh-faced young woman who had set goals, her determination as strong as her abilities. He remembered when she got her first promotion. He had taken her out to dinner to celebrate at a place they normally couldn't afford. When she objected, Dave showed her his very first bonus check, telling her she wasn't the only one in the company who was rewarded for hard work. As fresh as it was yesterday, he remembered the lovemaking, the celebration of two young people desperately in love and on top of the world. He also remembered afterwards, as they lay exhausted, her head on his chest, her hand rubbing across his stomach as he toyed with her hair, thinking things were just going to get better. To make a long story short, they didn't get better. Dave watched as each promotion sent her a little farther away from him. Her clothes got more expensive, her makeup and hair done by top-of-the-line professionals. She grew angry if he even tried to kiss her before they went to one function or another, always with her as the center of attention. He remembered standing around, mostly ignored, feeling useless. Finally, he stopped going except on really important events. Beverly was pissed at first, saying it sent the wrong message before spinning it to look like it was her idea. He nearly tore her head off when it got back to him that she told people he didn't go because he was embarrassed he couldn't keep up with the conversations. He made it a point to go to every function for a while, seeking out important clients, especially, and having long, in-depth conversations about things she never had a clue he even remotely knew. It got to the point where she asked him to tone it down so the focus could be on her. Well, today was the day Beverly thought as she walked toward the conference room at the local state employment office. Her career would either be over or not, depending on the outcome of the negotiations. She hadn't seen her husband in almost 3 weeks and was surprised at his appearance. He had lost most of the spare tire, let his hair grow out a little, and was sporting a closely trimmed beard. It made him look distinguished and young at the same time, if that was possible. There was what could only be described as a blonde bombshell sitting beside him. But Bev knew looks could be deceiving. This was Amanda Austin, one of the most experienced and feared labor lawyers in the state. She was there more as an observer, gathering more data for the lawsuit she knew was coming. Beverly had the best counterpart my company had to offer. With her, he'd spent a little time coaching her on how to answer the inevitable questions, how to project confusion about how this had happened when all she was doing was what was best for the company. She asked him how he thought they would do. This case is a train wreck waiting to happen. There's no paper trail, no write-ups, no warnings, no explanation of the consequences if he didn't improve. His last review was very complimentary. By company policy, you should have had his manager handle the termination with someone from HR as a witness. He was entitled to an appeal to the next person up the food chain, in this case, you. Since you fired him and never gave him a chance to take it to a higher authority, you once again breached company policy. You know, I read your file before I came down here, and you received really good reviews. The home office and the board spoke about you in the highest terms. Yet, here you are, making a mistake that someone fresh out of college would avoid. I'll do my best, but if he wants to make it ugly, we can't stop him. Have you talked to him at all lately? Does he have any idea of the negative impact this could have on your future? Beverly had to admit she hadn't, which made his frown deepen. He probably knew almost exactly what would happen to her if things went badly. Everyone sat down, and the arbitrator started the meeting. She had a video camera set up to record everything. She began by introducing herself as an arbitrator from the State Employment Commission and explained that while they might reach some kind of agreement, it wouldn't be binding until everything was written down and notarized. She also explained that if an agreement couldn't be reached or if either party disagreed with her decision, they were free to take it to the Capitol or, if that failed, to court in the form of lawsuits. First, she thanked the HR representative for sending her a copy of the company's termination policy beforehand so she could familiarize herself with the procedures. Before letting anyone else speak, she asked a few questions. Mr. Waxman, Miss Patterson, I understand you are a married couple. Is that correct? Beverly said yes as positively as she could, and Dave just nodded. Tell me, Miss Patterson, how has this impacted your marriage? Do you consider what your husband is doing reasonable? I'd like to clear this up before it escalates to the civil stage. Dave didn't speak up, so Beverly went first. We are most definitely married and will remain so. Yes, it has absolutely impacted our marriage. He's moved out, hasn't talked to me since, and now we're here. I must have told him 100 times that what I did was just business and shouldn't impact our private lives. I really don't understand why he's doing this. The arbitrator thought the woman was delusional. How could it not impact their marriage? She had told him he had no value to the company, terminated him after 9 years, sent him home, and couldn't understand why he was angry. She turned to the husband. Mr. Waxman, care to comment? Ma'am, on the advice of my lawyer, I am not here to discuss my domestic situation. This meeting is solely to determine if my wrongful termination complaint has merit. Fair enough. Miss Patterson, please tell me exactly what occurred the day you terminated Mr. Waxman and state your reasons for letting him go. Beverly explained how his supervisor, Bob Adler, had come to her to discuss Mr. Waxman's terrible sales record going back almost a year. She stated she had no idea his numbers had gotten so bad and that after discussing it in depth with his manager, they agreed he should be let go. She also said it was the hardest business decision she had ever made, but she had to put the interests of the company first. The arbitrator asked for documentation and frowned when none could be produced. Tell me, Miss Patterson, if this employee had a very good record for 8 years and then his sales plummeted, would you not have been curious and tried to determine why? If he had been a good employee for so long, surely he deserved a chance to turn his sales around. A probationary period, explained in detail in writing, outlining what failure to produce would result in, and monthly monitoring to ensure he was going in the right direction. The reason I ask is that this very scenario is described in the company manual your HR department sent me for employees with at least 5 years of tenure. Beverly squirmed and gave her canned answer. That is correct, but as CEO, I have the authority to terminate anyone at will. The numbers had dropped so radically that I thought we were in danger of losing some very old and lucrative accounts. In fact, that is exactly what is happening. I felt I had no choice. The arbitrator nodded and then turned to Dave. Sir, does this sound reasonable? Dave actually grinned. Not at all. There was a reason the numbers were low. I even tried to explain it to Miss Patterson a few times at work and in our domestic situation, but she told me I needed to stay out of things above my pay grade, so I dropped it. Tell me then, why did your numbers drop so dramatically? Believe it or not, it was planned. We were coming out with a new and improved product, and there was a lot of old inventory still available. I talked the customers into buying the new product by discounting the old and clearing it out of inventory. I have statements from 4 of our customers substantiating this. As soon as the old inventory reached a predetermined threshold, they were going to order the new product in bulk. It was a win-win for everyone. They got the old inventory at a discount, which would be more than made up for when they ordered the new. So yes, I goofed off a little, played golf, and had dinners with clients while we discussed projected volume. I never once forgot I had the best interests of my company to watch out for. My immediate supervisor knew all this. Why isn't he here? I asked specifically for him. This isn't a court, Mr. Waxman. I can't force someone to appear at an informal hearing. Do you have any proof of your claims? Amanda Austin reached into her briefcase and extracted some paperwork, passing it to the arbitrator. She read through a few documents, frowning. The corporate lawyer tried to stop her, but she told him again that this wasn't a courtroom. He settled by demanding to see the documents after she was done. She handed him a sheet, and as he reviewed it, his frown deepened. They argued back and forth until the arbitrator put a stop to it. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. I've heard and seen enough. Miss Patterson, you were in direct violation of company guidelines when you terminated Mr. Waxman. To put it in legal terms, you denied him due process. My finding is that Mr. Waxman was let go without cause or recourse to his rights under company guidelines. Therefore, I'm ordering you to reinstate him with no recriminations and to pay his salary from the time he was separated from the company until now. Either of you may appeal this decision if you wish, but you will have to travel to the Capitol, and it will be considered a legal proceeding. Does anyone object at this time? With her head down in despair, Beverly shook her head. Now Dave spoke. I'll accept the back pay, ma'am, and thank you. I will not return to the company because I feel it would be a toxic environment. Besides, I have a new job that I'm really enjoying. Well, she was truly screwed, Dave thought. They realized her career was over, and she would be lucky if they let her stay with the company. Her lawyer and Dave's had a few words afterward, and he was definitely still not smiling when he returned to the office. They went into a conference room, and he spelled it out. The hearing went pretty much as I expected. You need to make sure he gets that check as soon as possible. Amanda told me they are suing us, naming you, Adler, and the company in the suit. I told her to set a time, and we would get together and settle. Apparently, your husband doesn't want to settle. He wants to air it out in court and make it a matter of public record. That means anyone with any sense can look it up. How many talented people do you think will look at that and not send us resumes? I frankly don't know how to proceed. Normally, we would throw a little money at him, and it would just go away. That won't work here because it's not about the money. You need to talk to your husband as soon as possible and get him to let us work something out. I would do that very thing, sir, if I knew how to get in touch with him. He's left me, changed his number, and just disappeared. None of our mutual friends have heard from him or even seen him. When he said he had a new job, it was news to me. This is a small market, and I would have heard if he was selling for someone else. I'll try a few of his friends, telling them it's extremely urgent, but I have no idea if they'll help. He left saying as soon as he got the paperwork, he would return. Jen took Beverly out to lunch to cheer her up. It didn't really work. Jen, clever girl that she was, distracted Bev by talking about the upcoming visit to Solomon Industries. The old man has always liked you, Beth. Turn on the charm and get him back into the fold. Free words of advice. While he likes you, he doesn't care much for Adler. I couldn't tell you why, but it's pretty well known that if she paused, stopping herself from saying ex-husband, if Dave wasn't running interference, Adler would have angered him enough to have already left. Beverly's head was swimming. She asked herself why, as CEO, she didn't have that information. A small voice was starting to say she should have paid more attention to Dave when he talked about his job. She had finally admitted to herself, after half a bottle of scotch, that she had been minimizing his position for quite a while and was struggling to understand why. Dave had, without a doubt, destroyed the woman he was supposed to love and support. She would be extremely lucky if she got to keep her job or even stay with her company. Did he feel good about it? Not really. He knew how much she loved that job, how she loved giving out her business card with CEO on it. He did, however, feel vindicated. She had brought this on herself. It was a lot worse than what she would have done to just an employee, but it would have been only a matter of time before her arrogance and egotism drove her to do something just as stupid to someone else. Maybe she would mark it up to hard experience and use it as a learning opportunity. Now that part of their lives was over, Dave wondered if they had any chance to get over it and remain a couple. He knew he would never return to the old relationship. It would be a full partnership or nothing. He was certain he would never live in that monstrosity she called a home. It was nothing more than an edifice to her success. Sad, really, it would have made a great home in which to raise children. One thing he had to look forward to was the money. The back pay, almost 5 months' worth, was a nice chunk of change. Amanda was on his case to settle instead of dragging it out in court, reminding him that the best revenge was living well. They had sued the company for $2 million, and she said they would probably offer 20% just to keep it out of the papers. She found out they were in the process of merging with a competitor, and this little incident would severely impact their worth going forward. Firing Beverly would really help at this stage, but it might save them some face. Dave liked the new town. It was half the size of the city he left, and the pace was more relaxed. The people were friendlier, and he couldn't ask for a better place to work. Best of all, the housing market was a little depressed, making it possible to buy a lot more home with a lot less money than he would have spent back home. He grinned and shrugged at the thought. What did back home constitute exactly? He wasn't at all sure anymore. Dave even had his eye on a place that had been for sale for almost a year, a larger, older 2-story on 6 acres of land. He didn't need that much, but it would be fun to own. The owners were getting anxious to sell, and he had a feeling he could get a really good deal. He researched it online, and it seemed solid, with no major problems other than the roof. It was still good but was 20 years old. He'd already decided that if he bought it, he would replace the shingles with tin. It was all the rage, and he had fond memories of staying with his grandparents on their farm in the summer, going to sleep with the sound of rain on the roof. That night, Dave dreamed something he rarely did. Likely, he dreamed all the time, but he hardly ever remembered them. This dream had him sitting on the front porch of the house beside a woman. Both of them were in a glider, rocking gently while they watched 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, run around the yard playing with a ball. 2 dogs, one big and one small, chased them. A large calico cat sat on the railing, looking on, seemingly bored. In a wave of love, he turned to kiss his companion only to discover she had no face. He woke with a start and lay there trying to figure out what it meant. Sighing, he got up, deciding to hit the gym on the way to work. It was going to be a busy day. Beverly didn't sleep well that night, and as she got ready for work, she noticed the bags under her eyes. She hoped it was just stress-related, but if they were permanent, well, she knew a good doctor. In her world, to maintain a competitive edge, one had to look 25, even if one had 15 years of experience. She was looking forward to what was coming. The lawyer had done a little research on Bob and came to her with disquieting news. It seemed he was in negotiations with the company they were merging with to take over her job. When the contracts were signed, corporate directives were very clear: remove the cancer immediately. This time, however, Bev had all her ducks in a row. Jack, their lawyer, and Angela, a woman flown down from corporate HR, would be with her to make sure there were no mistakes. It rankled Beverly a little to have them there. She was perfectly capable of handling it on her own. But recent experience taught her that this could be a good thing. Bob was surprised to find he wasn't going with her to CS. By then, she had no reason to sugarcoat the reasons. S despises you, Bob. I'm trying to get back in his good graces, and bringing you along would undermine that. He seemed surprised and then got angry. Screw that old fart, babe. His business doesn't mean that much to us. Do I need to remind you to remain professional here? I was never your babe, so you need to cut that out. If you think losing 18% of our sales base means so little, perhaps you're not as suited to your job as I first thought. You were pretty pissed when you heard the news. Think about that while I'm gone, and remember, we need to meet after I get back. So keep your schedule flexible. I'll call you when I return. She enjoyed the look on his face as she left and couldn't wait to see it when they lowered the boom that afternoon. Pushing him out of her mind as she drove, she worked on her presentation to S and his new purchasing manager. It had to be just right if she were to have any chance. S was waiting at the restaurant. Even though Bev was 15 minutes early, he stood and seated her, and she appreciated it. Dave had always been well-mannered, taught by a great uncle who instilled in him that manners never went out of style. She missed that among other things. They chatted for a minute, but when she started talking business, he stopped her. Please, Beverly, let's wait for my purchasing director. I want his opinions and insight on anything we go over. He should be here any minute. In fact, here he is now. Bev turned to greet him, and the words died in her throat. Dave was the new purchasing director. If she wasn't dead in the water before, she was now. He must have seen the despair in her eyes and spoke to her gently. Hello, Beverly. Wow, you went all out. I bet I haven't seen you in that dress 3 times, and each time was an important event in your life. I can see why you wore it, though you always looked spectacular in it. Beverly didn't know how to answer, so she changed the subject. This is the job you talked about in arbitration? You're in purchasing now? For a salesman, that must be like going to the dark side. He grinned. It is kind of, but it's really just sales in reverse, if you can understand what I mean. Besides, it's worth it when I see salesmen and they realize who I am. It blows their plans completely. I've been there, done that, and there isn't much they can surprise me with. It actually makes things easier. They know they can't fool me, so they just get down to negotiations. That being said, let's enjoy lunch and talk business later. It was surreal for Beverly, sitting there eating lunch with her husband, knowing he held all the power. She couldn't help but wonder if that was how he felt at times. Dessert over with, cups of very good coffee in hand, she began her speech. She pointed out how long they had done business together, how well they had responded to S's needs, and how they could continue to service him with excellence in the future. Dave let S take the lead, for which he was grateful. S listened but stopped her halfway through. All you say is true, Beverly, but let's not forget who landed our business in the first place and served us so well over the years. I was buying that as well as material, and now, well, the situation has changed. Before you ask, yes, I did have a verbal commitment with your salesman. Once he left the company, though, I no longer considered it binding. The South Koreans, to be honest, have a better product at a great price. It exceeds the specifications we have for your product. My purchasing agent happens to know the son of the owner and finds him trustworthy. Who are you going to replace Dave with? Adler? I don't think so. I've never liked him, but more importantly, I never trusted him. Even if we had stayed with you, I'd insist on another account. I always liked you, Beverly, even if I didn't exactly like the things you did sometimes. I'm still your friend if you let me, but professionally, we're pretty much through. I have another appointment, so I'm leaving. You can continue to press your case with my purchasing agent if you wish. Best of luck." He said the last with a grin, bent down, and kissed her cheek. "He still loves you," he whispered, "but it's going to be a long road to get him to trust you again. Give it your best shot." Did Dave enjoy the lunch? Yes, on several levels. Did he enjoy her pain? Just a small amount. It was very satisfying to see her looking lost and confused and not the supremely confident megawitch she projected most of the time. In her natural environment, she looked at him sadly. "We don't have a chance, do we? Are you talking professionally or privately? If you're talking business, then no, you don't. Their product is superior to yours in almost every way, much cheaper and readily available. Even if I were still with the company, it would have only been a matter of time before we started losing customers. You need to get with corporate and rethink your business plan. Maybe you should go in the direction I suggested a year ago, retool your assembly lines, get R&D more involved. It's time to reinvent yourselves, or you'll be as extinct as the dinosaurs in a few years." Dave looked into her confused eyes and realized she didn't recall what he tried to tell her all those months ago. He was no business genius, but he was literate enough to read the writing on the wall. Then again, he didn't have power. Arrogance and egotism are their own reward. They sat silently for a few minutes. "Dave," she said in a timid voice, "may I ask about us?" Dave almost laughed but stopped himself. Instead, he asked her as gently as possible, "What us?" "You and me, honey. Please, you need to move back home so we can go back to what we had. I miss you very much." Dave got the impression that she was surprised by his reply. "What us? There hasn't been an us for going on 3 years now. There was me, the ornament at dinners and parties, someone to come home to, but that's about it. I was just a minor supporting character in the movie of your life. Intimacy died between us years ago, Beverly, and I don't see a resurgence in our future. Before you say it, yes, we were intimate on rare occasions, but stop to think, how many times did I initiate it in the last 2 years? I'll give you a hint, never. I felt like I was just a human dildo there to give you release when you needed it. There was no foreplay to speak of before and no snuggling after. As soon as you got off, you were ready to roll over and go to sleep, whether I'd gotten anything out of it or not. Don't deny it. Instead, think about it, and you'll see I'm right." He could see conflicting emotions playing across her face, but he was on a roll, getting things he'd wanted to say for years off his chest. As for coming home, well, I'll never darken the door of that house again, whether we stay together or not. It was never a home. It was a monument to your success, and you fought me tooth and nail when I wanted to make changes. In fact, I have a bid in now on a home I think I'll really like. It's an older 2-story, too much house for me, actually, but it has lots of room and a little acreage. Best of all, it already has a building that would be perfect for the workshop I've dreamed about for years and room for the vegetable garden I've always wanted to plant. I'm sorry, honey, but after 8 years of living in your shadows, I've learned to love the light. Where does that leave us?" It was so sad and forlorn that he toned it down. "I couldn't tell you. I suspect we'll never be together as man and wife again. You have to respect your partner, and I haven't had that from you as a man or employee for quite a while now. I'm not a supporting character anymore, Beverly. I want my own show. I realize now that it's at least partly my fault we ended up like this, but at the time, I loved you so much that if it made you happy, I learned to live with it. The more I gave, the more you wanted, until it got to the point I had nothing left to give. I suspect, deep down, that was the exact moment when you realized you didn't need me anymore. You had minimized my impact on your life to the point that I was invisible to you. Really, it shouldn't be that hard on you. Just carry on as you've been doing, and pretty soon, I'll just be a dim memory." He stood, placing his hand on her shoulder. "Go back to the love of your life, Bev, your job. And free advice, stay away from Adler. The man's a snake. I don't know how he got into your head long enough to scramble your brains, but step back and consider what he had to gain by poisoning your mind against me. Think about it, and don't worry too much. You've been too good for too long for this brain fart to wound you fatally. You might lose a notch or two and have to do some major butt kissing, but the company still knows your worth. Goodbye, Bev." He paused for just a second. I'm sorry my company and yours have come to a parting of the ways, Beverly, but really, it's just business, you know. She flinched, and he wondered if she caught his meaning. It was the exact phrase she had used to justify firing him. Beverly wanted to sit for a while and digest everything, so she went to a park she'd seen on the way into town, parked, found a bench, and reviewed her life. Some of it filled her with immense satisfaction. She could remember every promotion, the hard work she had done to get it, and the immediate plans to move to the next level until finally, she was at the top of her little food chain. Some of it filled her with unease, the anniversaries she'd missed, always promising to make it up to Dave, the birthdays, the special events in his life, her parents, his parents, and their friends' lives, all missed while she chased the next deal. She remembered seeing the fleeting look of pain in Dave's eyes when the toddler of one of their friends' children tottered up to him with upraised arms. He cuddled the child, and for a moment, Bev had a vision, it was their child. She shook it off. Unless Dave would consent to being a full-time house husband, there would never be any children in their future. She'd seen many women full of talent and promise get sidelined and passed by because they couldn't commit fully to the job because of family. Besides, she was 36, so that ship had probably already sailed. She sat straight up in shock at her realization. God, Dave was right. He would always be second in my priorities as long as I continued on the path I had committed to. It must really have felt like having another lover when he couldn't compete with my work. It hit her then that getting him back was going to be a long and difficult road. She did want him back. Yes, she had minimized him to the point of no respect, but he was her rock, the one she always turned to when she needed comfort and assurance, positive that, at least in his world, she was number one. The question was how. How could she undo the damage she'd done to his heart and his ego? Could she learn to balance career and marriage enough to keep him satisfied and assured he was the most important thing to her? She knew it would be horrifically difficult, but she was a driven, goal-oriented person, and if she set her mind to it, Bev knew she could do anything. Satisfied, she watched the children play for a bit, a sad smile on her lips. After a few minutes, it turned into a real smile. The first stop on her journey back would be to fire one of the snakes in her garden. She tried to muster up some sympathy for Bob but could find none. He had betrayed her, her husband, and the company. She wasn't as dense as he'd imagined, but she had to admit she was vain enough to listen to him feed her ego. Now it was time for his sins to come home to roost. She called ahead and set the time. Their lawyer and the HR representative were ready. They had arrived while she was gone, and she knew that after dealing with Bob, there would be some tough choices to be made and some bad news she would have to deal with. So be it. She had weathered storms before, and that day, it just wasn't as important to her as it had been in days past. Bob came in all smiles, which immediately faded when he saw who was in the room. She didn't have to introduce Jack, but he had never seen Angela. Bev went right for his throat. Bob, this is Angela from corporate HR. She'll be auditing this meeting. We've received some disturbing news about some of your recent activities, and in the interest of fairness, we've decided to hear what you have to say about it. Jack stepped in. I don't know how you found out about the merger talks, but when you did, you apparently ran straight to their company and engaged in a smear campaign against our CEO and our company, trying to woo them into giving you her job. Don't act surprised. Their representatives came to us with their concerns, so we know the whole story. I'm sorry to say the negotiations are on hold while we try to clean up our in-house mess. They made it clear that you have to go without reference for the talks to continue. Apparently, they've concluded that if you would do this to us, what's to keep you from doing it to them in the future? Bob went through several shades of red while he found his voice. So you found out. Let me guess, I'm to be terminated for cause. At least this time, you got your ducks in a row. I know you'll walk me through the appeal process, but I'd be wasting my time, so I'll go. Your company was right to try to dump this dinosaur. If there isn't a major restructure completed in the next 3 years, there will be nothing to spin off. He grinned at Beverly, which set her teeth on edge. You got too complacent, girl. I played you like a banjo, feeding that massive ego, undermining that loser of a husband, even if he was the best thing sales had going for them. I'm glad I never got around to screwing you. I bet you'd be next to worthless in bed. You're too wrapped up in yourself to give pleasure to anyone else." Of course, I would have lied, told you how hot you were, until it was time to get rid of you. Whatever, it doesn't matter now. I'll leave today and send word to payroll where to send the last check. May you live in interesting times, Bev. Beverly flamed red. Dave used to say that a lot, and she never knew what it meant until Bob heard him once and explained it to her. It's a Chinese proverb, or maybe a curse. Interesting times mean unrest, revolution, famine, things like that, while boring times mean everything is good. Bev kept a neutral look on her face when she answered him. Same to you, Mr. Adler. And I'd like to add another saying, cheaters never prosper. Stop looking for the path of least resistance and try to earn something for once in your life. Goodbye. Jack and Beverly stood and started walking out. Bob, glowing with anger, started to speak, but Angela cut him off. The time for talk is over, Mr. Adler. You have some documents I need you to sign, and then you can get on with your life. Please do not make this difficult. The two large security guards who appeared just then made him think that might be a good idea. He bought the house, getting a really good deal. He immediately gave the roofing contractor he had consulted the go-ahead, and 2 weeks later, the gray tin complemented the color of paint he had chosen for the exterior. While he was at it, he had the carpet pulled out and the original hardwood floors refinished. It had a wraparound porch, and Dave installed ceiling fans over the rockers in the porch swing to help keep it cool in the summer while he enjoyed the sunsets. He could have afforded the house using his back pay and part of his savings as a down payment, but he would have still carried a 15-year mortgage. So he succumbed to his lawyer's plea and took a settlement instead of going to court. It wasn't as much as they had hoped because, frankly, that division wasn't all that profitable anymore. He still got enough to buy the house outright, make the changes he wanted, and have some left over along with his severance pay and all his savings. That had been another bone of contention. Bev would never agree to a joint account, so they each had their own and deposited a set amount into a household fund. He knew that if they divorced, he would be entitled to half the value of the house because they never had a prenup, and since their earnings were so disparate, he could probably get maintenance for a few years. He grinned, thinking about how much that would have galled her. In the end, he decided to let her do the defining. After all, she determined everything else about their lives, so why should this be any different? He found that he was a natural in his new job, his years in sales benefiting him greatly. Surprisingly, 75% of the salesmen he dealt with loved him. He didn't play games, accept gifts, or kickbacks, and stopped doing business with anyone who tried to bribe or hustle him into accepting an inferior product. In general, he expected an honest price and excellent service. Those who dealt honestly and gave him what he wanted got his business. The other 25% learned quickly that Dave didn't require expensive dinners, outings to strip clubs, or rounds of golf at exclusive resorts. Some understood and appreciated his approach, others were so stuck in their ways they never learned and lost his business. Susan insisted he come to dinner at least twice a month, and the conversation inevitably turned to his domestic situation. Dave wisely stayed out of it, but Susan would not be deterred. When are you going to stop punishing the poor girl and take her back? She's suffered enough. She calls me, maybe once a week, and we always have the same discussion. She wants to know how you're doing, if you're happy, and though you can hear the pain when she asks if you're dating, I tell her the truth straight from your mouth. You refuse to see any woman socially until the day the ring comes off your finger. Dave tolerated it a few times before he got a little irritated. Susan, I admire you a great deal. If there were a category called ideal wife in the dictionary, it would show your face. But let me ask you something, you had a pretty good career when you married. You worked for 6 more years before you quit and became a full-time mother. Did he ever shut you out of anniversaries, dates that were important to you or your children? Did he ever once put his business before you and your family? Did he minimize your contributions to the relationship? Dave paused and waited. She finally admitted there had been maybe 3 times in their marriage when the job had to come first, but that he had felt so badly about them that he showered her and the children with affection for weeks afterward. Well, I didn't have that experience. Her attitude was suck it up, big boy, this is more important. I lost friends and relationships I'd had for years, victims of her career. I'm just now getting used to having friends again, accepting invitations for little get-togethers, things that are simple and mundane to them but precious to me. They're not networking per se, just hanging out and enjoying the company. I've got a house I love, a place to enjoy my hobbies, and I even got to plant a little garden, something I've wanted to do for years. Does that mean I don't miss her? No. I remember the little things before she became important, the spur-of-the-moment trips to sightsee, which was code for making love in a strange bed, and the conversations about life we used to have years ago when we actually shared a vision. I remember all that, but those memories are dim, and the ones fresh in my mind are of her egotism and arrogance. She was like a sports star who read her own press, believing every story. She wants me back, why? Most importantly, Susan, if she wants me, why hasn't she come to me? She's still in queen mode, waiting for the errant knight to return. If she's not willing to put any effort into our almost dead marriage, what makes you think she wants it that badly? I haven't even received a phone call. It doesn't sound like she's all that heartbroken to me. In this case, Madam needs to come to the mountain. Now, I love you both dearly, and your husband is my boss, but this is the last conversation we're having about Beverly. If you'll excuse me. He hadn't ranted or raved but had said everything in a calm, reasoned manner. But the message was clear, leave it alone. Susan looked thoughtful, and Susan was red with embarrassment. She rose as he was leaving and surprised him with a hug. I'm sorry, Dave. I won't push you anymore, but you're wrong. She misses you terribly, and the truth is she's afraid to talk to you. She doesn't really know what to say and is afraid you'll bite her head off. I'm going to call her in a bit and tell her what you said, and you have my solemn word this will be the last time I involve myself. She grinned and kissed his cheek. Besides, you're doing too well in your job for me to rock the boat. I estimate your contributions have shaved at least 3 years off our retirement plans. Carry on. It never occurred to Dave that Susan was thinking about retiring. He was just over 50, but his daughter was due to start work in the near future, and popular rumor had it that as soon as he felt comfortable with her at the helm, he was going to sail away into the sunset. Dave had a fleeting thought of working with another Beverly and wondered if he could handle it. Once again, Beverly went home to an empty house to eat takeout and pretend to watch television. She had escaped the axe, but it was a close thing. The chairman and 2 board members flew down unannounced, scaring the whole office. She was almost faint when they called her into the conference room. She felt like a schoolgirl in front of the principal. Their expressionless stares didn't bolster her self-confidence. After almost a minute, the senior board member spoke. All right, Beverly, tell us what happened, and more importantly, tell us why. Don't whitewash it, or you'll be out of here so fast your head will spin. We've always trusted you to be honest. It would be a shame if we were to start doubting you now. It took a few pauses and a couple of crying breaks, but she got it out. She had nothing to lose, so she told them the truth. She had let her ego get the best of her, relied on people who didn't have the company's best interests at heart, and got played like a foolish schoolgirl. They seemed relieved when it was over and sympathetic. How are things on the home front? Have you kissed and made up yet? This started another round of tears. The chairman got a box of tissues and set them in front of Beverly. She mumbled her thanks as she blew her nose. No, and I doubt we're going to. I haven't talked to my husband in weeks. He's living in a new town with a new job, in a house he bought, and has no intentions of leaving. I've always liked Dave, reflected the chairman. It seems out of character for him to ignore your gestures of reconciliation. Beverly flushed red and told them she hadn't contacted him because she was ashamed and didn't know what to say. The chairman said, well, there you go then. We may as well accept your resignation now. 2 of the traits I admired most in you were your ability to analyze a problem and your tenacity in achieving your goals. Obviously, you don't want your husband back, and to be honest, someone who shows so much hesitation and indecision is not top management material. I remember the times not that long ago when the hounds of hell couldn't keep you from accomplishing your goals. His words stung. Only the fact that he was right kept her from lashing out. He saw her face redden and the sudden thrust of her jaw, and chuckled. There you are. I was beginning to think I'd lost you for good. Now listen closely, you're still on shaky ground here. Bill, Jack and I are your only supporters right now, and we've gone out on a limb for you. Do not chop it off behind us. You still have your job, but don't look for a favorable review or a bonus this year. What you do have is a second chance. But hear us out before you sigh in relief. This division was headed for a crash, Beverly. We're aware of the South Koreans and their imminent threat. If we stay the course we're on now, we would be out of business in 3 years. It's one of the reasons we decided to sell this division off while it was still at the top. Your little gaffe brought that to a grinding halt. Between the suit and the snake you had trusted stabbing us all in the back, we're not nearly as desirable. The merger talks are history. What you need to do is figure out a way to reinvent the division, come up with products and services, and give it a viable future. I'm going to be as blunt as necessary here. Do it, and you redeem yourself. Fail, and you're out. We're giving you a year. His voice softened. It's the best we could do, Beverly. I know you'll make us proud. Even if you fail, we have faith in you. She was so overwhelmed that a simple handshake wouldn't do, so she gave each a heartfelt hug, swearing she would give it everything she had. She hugged the chairman last, after the others had gone. He took her hands after they broke. I'm going to give you advice on something that has nothing to do with work. If you really want Dave back, you'll have to go to him. He'll never come to you because you've hurt his pride too badly. He holds the power now, child. He's got a good job, good friends, and a bright future. You're going to have to show him you want an equal partner, and you have to mean it. The first instance of backsliding, and it will be over. I really believe you forgot, but Dave is a pretty shrewd individual. He saw the writing on the wall for this division last year. We even had a brief talk about it the last time I was down, and he mentioned the South Korean company then. He even had some ideas on how to rechannel our efforts to make us more viable in the market. I was impressed enough to tell him to discuss it with you. I have the feeling that discussion never took place. If it had, perhaps we wouldn't be having this talk now. Call me if you need resources, and if I think it's justified, I'll allocate them. Think about everything I said, business and private, and make good decisions. She left the conference room and went back to her office. Jen was hovering, and Beverly told her it was not all bad news, but that she needed some time to marshal her thoughts. She also asked Jen not to let anyone disturb her for the rest of the day.